Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to talk about pleura, and the topics covered in this video are given here. We are mainly covering the definition of pleura, what is the division and on which criteria pleura is divided, and again the further division of parietal pleura. Then we will talk about pleural cavity, pleural recess, finally blood supply and nerve supply, and we will finish the topic after discussing some clinical scenarios. So without further ado, let us start. First, the definition of pleura. We know that most of the organs in our body, it is covered by a connective tissue sheet in order of its fixation and its protection. For example, you can take into account the peritoneum, which covers the intraperitoneal organs of abdomen. Similarly, you can take into account pericardium. Here, in case of lungs, pleura is the connective tissue sheet which is covering the lungs. So what according to book is that each pleural cavity is lined by a single layer of flat cells which is called the mesothelium and an associated layer of supporting connective tissue, and together they form pleura. So what do we mean by pleura? So pleura means connective tissue and mesothelium. Okay. Okay, now we come to the division of pleura. As you see, pleura is divided into parietal pleura and visceral pleura. As the name suggests, parietal pleura is present on the outside. As we know, parietal means it is present relatively outside or on the periphery. On the other hand, visceral means it is associated with the viscera or it is adherent to the viscera. So, the definition, what is the definition of parietal and visceral pleura? You remember that parietal pleura, it actually surrounds or it forms the outer wall of the pleural cavity, or it is covering the inner part of the thoracic wall. Yes, and what is visceral pleura? Visceral pleura is continuous throughout the walls, fissures and borders of lungs, but it is discontinuous at the hilum of lung. So you can see here, this is the hilum of lung that I am demarcating right now. And this hilum has also a great significance because this is the point where the parietal pleura is continuous with the visceral pleura. You can see this is the point where this parietal, the outer parietal pleura comes and it is actually continuous with the visceral pleura. Now, this parietal and visceral pleura, they will continue and it forms the hilum which continues downward as pulmonary ligament. Now we go to the next topic, that what is pleural cavity. Now it's very simple after we understand parietal and visceral pleura. Simply we say that pleural cavity, it is actually the potential space that is present between parietal and visceral pleura. For example, the blue color line that I am drawing right here, suppose this is the parietal pleura, and the green color line that I am drawing here, suppose this is visceral pleura. So between the blue and the green color line, you can see potential spaces, okay, which I am drawing in pink color. This potential space is called pleural cavity. Now, pleural cavity contains mainly the serous fluid. And you know that this pleural cavity has some functional significance. First thing, that the serous fluid that is present in the pleural cavity actually helps to helps during inspiration and expiration of lungs, so that the lungs can inflate and deflate against the thoracic wall without any friction. Yes, and during pleurisy or pleural effusion, this accumulation of fluid will be in this pleural cavity, which we will discuss in later slides. Now we move to the next topic. Here I am also showing the hilum of the lung. You can see this is the hilum of the lung. This is the point where parietal pleura is continuous with visceral pleura along with the pulmonary ligament. Okay, so you can see that on the lateral side you observe a continuous layer of parietal pleura. On the other hand, medially you can see the reflection of the parietal pleura. Okay, here also the same thing has been demarcated. Now come to the next topic. What are the further divisions of parietal pleura? Now the pleura, the parietal pleura has been divided on the basis of its location. Okay, so instead of going to the theory part, you at first have a look on the diagram. You see here that this parietal pleura, it is divided into four main parts: cervical, costal, mediastinal and diaphragmatic. Now just focus on the name itself. Cervical means it is covering the apex of the lung. Now costal means it is mainly covering the costal surface of the lung. Mediastinal pleura, it is mainly covering the mediastinal part of the lung, and this is the mediastinal pleura which finally continues with the visceral pleura along the hilum and the pulmonary ligament. Finally we have diaphragmatic pleura. As the name suggests, it actually covers the diaphragmatic surface of lung. So I think the diagram itself has explained the theory part. But let me tell you one thing, that this cervical pleura has some additional points, that this cervical pleura, it is actually taught to the muscles of the neck. You know that above the cervical pleura, you have one musculoconnective tissue which is known as suprapleural membrane. You see, this is the suprapleural membrane. This is suprapleural membrane. So this suprapleural membrane, it has muscular and connective tissue component. So the muscular component, it is formed by scalenus minimus. On the other hand, the connective tissue component is formed by endothoracic fascia. So let us move to this diagram. You can clearly see here the suprapleural membrane. I think it's clear right now that this is the suprapleural membrane, and this suprapleural membrane, it is actually taught, it covered by this suprapleural membrane. It has this muscular component which is scalenus minimus, so that it gets taught to the muscle of neck. Okay, now we come to pleural recess. So what is the definition of pleural recess? You remember that pleural recess are actually the pleural cavity which are enlarged. Simply you remember that pleural recesses, they are the potential spaces where the lungs do not reach during normal inspiration. Okay, so here what you see here, that the expansion of lungs into these spaces, the spaces mean the pleural recesses, occurs only in forced inspiration. So hence they are the potential spaces and they are the enlarged. You can also say that they are the enlarged pleural cavities, enlarged pleural cavities. Yes? Okay. And what is the other significance? You look that these recesses act as potential spaces, I have already said, where fluid can be accumulated, and here we see that the pleural recess, it has been mainly divided into costomediastinal recess and costodiaphragmatic recess. Also there is another recess which has been demarcated, but it's not so significant, which is the mediastinodiaphragmatic recess. Now you come to the clinical part, that during, this is the case of pleural effusion. So during pleural effusion, you can see during during pleural effusion, fluid is accumulated here in costodiaphragmatic recess, and the process through which the fluid is aspirated from this recess is known as parasympathesis thoracis. So the recesses, they are actually the important sites where the fluid can be aspirated as a treatment of pleural effusion. Okay. Now here there is another diagram of pleural effusion. Finally, we come to the blood supply and the nerve supply. So have a look at the blood supply. The blood supply of the visceral pleura is with bronchial vessels, the same blood supply with lungs, and parietal pleura by intercostal and the pericardiophrenik vessels. So what you can see, that the blood supply of visceral pleura coincides with the viscera, that is lung. On the other hand, the blood supply of the parietal pleura coincides with the thoracic wall. Okay. Now you come to the nerve supply. Here you have to see one very clinical significance, that the visceral pleura, it is actually the visceral pleura, it is supplied by the T5, T2 to T5 ganglia parasympathetic from vagus nerve. So basically it is the autonomic nerve. Yes. So visceral pleura is supplied by autonomic nervous system. On the other hand, parietal pleura, it is supplied by somatic nervous system. And what is the clinical significance that we want to spot here, that any irritation in the parietal pleura, it is reflected as pain. On the other hand, the irritation of visceral pleura, it is not reflected as pain. This is the most important clinical significance of the nerve supply of parietal and visceral pleura. Again, I want to demarcate one thing, that the thoracic nerves mainly supply the diaphragmatic pleura and the costal pleura. Remember, diaphragmatic means the outer part of diaphragmatic pleura. On the other hand, phrenic nerve, it mainly supplies mediastinal pleura and central part of diaphragmatic pleura. And what is the clinical significance here? That if the diaphragmatic part or the costal part of this parietal pleura is irritated, then the pain, it can be sensitized throughout the thoracic wall, and even it radiates to the abdomen. Okay. But if the mediastinal and the central part of the diaphragmatic pleura is irritated, then the nerve is transmitted even to the shoulders. So this is the most important clinical scenario. Now finally we are going to end our topic with some clinical terms. So just have a look at the clinical terms. First, pleuracy. What is pleuracy? The definition means inflammation of pleura. What is pleural effusion? I already said accumulation of fluid in pleural cavities and pleural recesses. Here it is demarcated very clearly. What is hemothorax? The name suggests hem means blood, so accumulation of blood in pleural cavities. And what is pneumothorax? The name pneumo suggests accumulation of air in pleural cavities. Okay. Now, so finally we are ending this topic by discussing some radiographs. You see that on left side this is a normal radiograph, and on the right side you have the radiograph of pleural effusion. You can see this radio opacity. So what is the cause of this radio opacity? This radio opacity is caused by the accumulation of fluid in this pleural cavity, and this is giving rise to this radio opacity. So we can diagnose pleural effusion with radiographs in this manner. Okay. So in this way we are going to complete our session today. So if you like my video, then please do like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.